The mansion's ballroom was lit by grand chandeliers, reflecting the family's almost overwhelming wealth. Among crystal glasses and empty conversations, the young millionaire moved with his chin held high, displaying a smile of superiority that charmed some and irritated many. His steady steps conveyed confidence, but his eyes revealed an emptiness hidden behind the glitter of showiness. He was used to being admired, feared, and above all, obeyed. The maid watched from a distance, accustomed to witnessing that same scene repeated night after night. With every party, her employer seemed further from reality and more arrogant toward everyone around him. She, with her quiet presence, preferred to remain invisible, but her critical gaze betrayed a deep weariness with all the frivolity. With every harsh word or superior gesture, her silent contempt grew. In the kitchen, the staff whispered about the young heir's extravagances, but she stayed quiet. She knew nothing would change by confronting him. He was surrounded by people who fed his vanity. Still, deep down, she felt a certain fascination between the gap between the man he showed to the world and the emptiness she sensed. Something told her that behind that arrogant smile was a soul suffocating under its own mask. Despite her exhausting routine, she knew every detail of the world she served. She knew the schedules, the rituals, and even the lies hidden among the guests. She was an invisible spectator to the dramas of the elite, able to see beyond appearances. That's why, when her employer's gaze met hers that night, a shiver ran through her. There was something different, a tension that suggested something was about to happen. While toasting with investors, the millionaire hid his restlessness. His family was pressuring him more and more to agree to a marriage of convenience, something he despised but didn't know how to avoid. With every fake smile he offered, he felt the trap closing in. His pride kept him from showing weakness, but inside, the idea of becoming a pawn in a family game consumed him. In the garden, away from watchful eyes, he took a deep breath, trying to fight the feeling of being suffocated. The fresh air contrasted with the weight of responsibilities on his shoulders. He knew that, no matter how much power he displayed, he was bound by invisible chains. The freedom he flaunted was just an illusion. And tonight, more than ever, that felt unbearable. The maid, during a quiet moment away from her duties, noticed his disguised loneliness. For the first time, she didn't see him surrounded by flattering friends or interested suitors. He seemed lost, vulnerable, almost human. That image stirred in her a mix of curiosity and boldness, feelings she rarely allowed to surface. As the night went on, the tension grew. Rumors about the pressure for the millionaire to announce his engagement spread through the halls. Each of his forced smiles seemed to confirm his family's expectations, but no one imagined that a silent resistance was growing within him. The maid began forming a plan in her mind. She knew an opportunity to turn things around might be approaching. She was tired of living on the margins, invisible and underestimated, and maybe this was the moment to change her own story. Watching her suffocated employer, she realized that behind all his power, he was also trapped. When the night came to an end, the mansion emptied, but the weight of decisions still hung in the air. He was more restless than ever, and she was more determined than she'd ever been. Fate, silent and relentless, was setting the stage for the encounter that would change everything for both of them.
If you're also curious to see how this bold proposal will completely change the fate of these two, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. That way, you'll be the first to follow every twist and turn of this exciting story. The next morning, the young millionaire faced the stern gaze of his parents. They spoke about alliances, business deals, and reputation, as if his life were just an extension of the family company. He listened in silence, but inside, he was fighting against the gilded prison they were building around him. The arranged marriage was treated as inevitable, and the pressure only grew stronger. After the conversation, he retreated into the halls of the mansion, trying to recover from the weight of their demands. It was there that he crossed paths with the maid, who was carrying a stack of towels. The quick glance they exchanged felt different, as if they both shared a secret that hadn't yet been spoken. For the first time, he didn't treat her with coldness, but with a strange mix of curiosity and need. That same night, during a dinner filled with guests, the situation reached its peak. His family publicly hinted that the engagement announcement would be made soon, making him feel trapped. The pressure was so intense that he abruptly left the table and hid in a side hallway. His heart raced, not just from anger, but from the fear of losing what little freedom he had left. It was at that moment that the maid found him, holding a serving tray. Her steady gaze contrasted with his desperation. Sensing his vulnerability, she took a deep breath and, in a calculated whisper, made her unexpected proposal. "Pretend to kiss me for 10 minutes, and I'll get you out of this." The words, blunt and bold, hit him like a bombshell. His eyes widened in disbelief. Mockery was his first reaction. He laughed arrogantly at how absurd the idea sounded. "You really think anyone would believe that? A maid pretending to be my girlfriend?" he sneered. But behind the sarcasm, there was a spark of interest, a flicker of hidden hope in his expression. She didn't back down in the face of his scorn. Calmly and firmly, she explained that she had been watching the family pressure him and knew exactly how to create a convincing act. If he agreed, she would play the perfect partner in public, neutralizing his family's plans. In return, she asked for a sum of money that would guarantee her independence. Her boldness left him speechless.
A heavy silence fell between them. He stared at her as if trying to decide whether she was crazy or brilliant. In the end, he realized he had no other options. Swallowing his pride, he muttered an almost inaudible, "All right." For the first time, the millionaire had given in to someone outside his circle of power. A silent pact was sealed in that hallway. They both knew they were about to step into a dangerous game, one where the line between lies and truth could easily blur. The kiss that never happened that night hung in the air like a promise of something much bigger. As he returned to the ballroom with a renewed expression, the maid stood still, feeling the weight of the decision she had just made. It wasn't just him who was trapped in an unwanted destiny. She had also just tied her life to a lie capable of changing everything. And so, under suspicious glances and fake smiles, the charade began, one that would bring employer and employee together in a web of appearances, pride, and secrets. Neither of them could predict just how far this game would take them. The morning after their silent agreement, the millionaire woke up feeling like he'd lost his mind. As he drank his coffee in the living room, he remembered the maid's steady gaze and the boldness of her proposal. He felt ridiculous for even considering it, but something in his mind insisted it might be his only way out. His pride, however, made him reluctant to fully accept the situation. He spent hours thinking about how he could stay in control. After all, he was used to manipulating others, not being manipulated. But the maid seemed to understand his weaknesses in a way that made him uncomfortable. That bothered him more than he wanted to admit, and his vanity fought against the logic of accepting help from someone he considered beneath him. Meanwhile, the maid went back to her routine as if nothing had happened. But inside, her heart was racing. She knew she'd crossed a dangerous line by proposing that pact. Still, she didn't regret it. It was her chance to change her life. For the first time, she felt in control of her own destiny, and that gave her the strength to face whatever risks lay ahead. At lunch, the millionaire discreetly called her aside for a private talk. His tone was mocking, but his eyes betrayed his uncertainty. He questioned whether she really believed anyone would buy their act. She answered calmly, explaining that she knew the family's weak spots and exactly how to convince them. Her confidence irritated him, but it also intrigued him. He tried to make fun of the idea one more time, but he realized he had no real argument. With every word, it became clearer that he was trapped in a dilemma: either accept her proposal or give in to the arranged marriage. And as much as it pained him to admit it, the maid was the only one offering him a way out.
After several minutes of heavy silence, he took a deep breath and said, "All right, let's try it." The words came out bitter, like poison in his mouth, yet, at the same time, they brought him an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time, he had a real chance to escape the suffocating trap closing in on him. She nodded calmly, showing no emotion, but inside, she felt the weight of the moment. She knew her life would never be the same from that point on. He saw her as a tool, but she saw this as her chance for real change. It was a dangerous game, and both of them were about to learn that keeping up their roles wouldn't be easy. To seal the deal, they laid down some ground rules. He laid out his terms, trying hard to hold on to his authority, while she listened patiently and added her own demands. For the first time, he realized he wasn't in full control, and that bothered him deeply. The pact was made, but the battle of egos had only just begun. By the end of their talk, the millionaire walked away with a half smile, convinced he could still twist the situation to his advantage. The maid, on the other hand, stood firm, certain she was steering something far bigger than he realized. Both believed they were in control, neither aware they were stepping into uncharted territory where no one could predict the outcome. And so, the charade began to take shape. His scorn and her determination would become the spark that ignited a relationship built on lies, one capable of revealing truths they never saw coming. The first rehearsals of their lie started quietly, far from the curious eyes of the mansion. Seated in a forgotten corner of the library, they crafted stories of how they'd met, polishing small details to make the act believable. To him, it felt like a game of pretend. To her, it was a chance to prove her intelligence. She turned out to be surprisingly skilled at building their backstory. She filled in moments, gestures, even small disagreements that would sound authentic. The millionaire, used to manipulating others with arrogance, grew irritated realizing the maid was better at persuasion than he was. The contrast between them became obvious, and every discussion crackled with tension. During one rehearsal, she asked him to look into her eyes the way he would in public. That simple request made him uncomfortable. Staring into her steady gaze, he felt he was facing someone he couldn't control. He tried to laugh it off, but even to himself, it sounded forced. For the first time, the act made him feel vulnerable. They kept practicing, in the hallways, the gardens, even during her breaks. Small touches, rehearsed smiles, and improvised conversations turned into dangerously real exercises. With each gesture, the line between acting and reality grew thinner. He was starting to realize playing with emotions wasn't as simple as he thought. Despite the tension, there were moments of unexpected lightness. A genuine laugh from her, sparked by one of his clumsy mistakes, broke down the barrier between employer and employee. No matter how much he tried to keep up his arrogant front, the millionaire found himself thrown off by her natural ease. It was like discovering a world he'd always ignored.
On the other hand, the maid kept her feet on the ground. She knew she couldn't let herself get carried away by emotions. For her, all of this was a strategy to gain her independence. Still, every now and then, she felt her heart beat a little faster than it should. It was dangerous, but inevitable. As the days passed, their rehearsals became routine. A sense of closeness grew between them, even if neither would admit it. He began trusting her more than anyone else in his circle, and that scared him. The maid, meanwhile, felt torn between reason and the emotions that kept rising to the surface. Their first real test was approaching, a gala where they'd have to appear as a couple for the very first time. Both knew it would be the moment that decided whether their act was believable. The pressure was intense, and anxiety hung over every rehearsal like a shadow. The night before the event, the millionaire couldn't sleep. He imagined the judgmental stares of the elite and feared being exposed. Surprisingly, the memory of the maid's steady confidence gave him strength. For the first time, he silently admitted to himself that he needed her. And so, the carefully rehearsed lie was ready for its debut. The stage was a luxurious ballroom, and the audience, a society hungry for scandal. What they didn't know yet was that in this game of appearances, the first real truths were about to come to light. The ballroom was decorated with rare flowers and sparkling chandeliers, reflecting the glow of the elite gathered there. Guests moved through the room with calculated smiles, eager to witness anything worth gossiping about. The millionaire made his entrance as imposingly as ever, but this time he was accompanied by the maid, transformed into a stunning woman. Dressed in simple elegance, she drew looks of both surprise and disdain. The tension was palpable. Every step they took side by side felt like a choreographed dance, but the weight of judgment hung over them like a cloud. The millionaire kept his expression firm, though his heart raced under everyone's gaze. The maid, meanwhile, walked with confidence, playing her part as if she were born for it. One of the most influential businessmen approached, greeting the millionaire enthusiastically. Soon his eyes turned to her, studying her with an ironic smile. He asked how they'd met, and that's when the first real test began. She answered calmly and naturally, telling their rehearsed story of a chance meeting at a coffee shop. Her conviction even surprised the millionaire. The questions kept coming, some disguised as curiosity, others laced with venom. Each of her replies was sharp, holding up their act with skill. The millionaire, used to being the center of attention, found himself playing a supporting role as he watched the maid command the room. His pride mixed with the secret sense of admiration, a new and uncomfortable feeling.
Amidst curious glances and hushed whispers, the fake couple began to spark rumors. Some believed their relationship was real, others saw it as a desperate move. The elite, always hungry for scandal, watched their every move closely. The pressure was mounting, but with every shared smile, a deeper understanding grew between them. At one point, soft music filled the ballroom, and couples began to dance. Reluctantly, the millionaire offered her his hand. The touch, meant to be just part of the act, sent an unexpected shiver through both of them. Out on the dance floor, their eyes met with an intensity that went far beyond their rehearsed script. For a few seconds, it wasn't pretend anymore. The dance, however, drew even more attention. Whispers spread across the room, and the millionaire's family watched with tense expressions. His father, in particular, looked furious but held back in public. The act was working, but they would pay a price. The millionaire knew that by the end of the night, he'd face serious questions at home. As they stepped off the dance floor, she offered a subtle smile, as if she knew she'd passed the first test. He stayed quiet, still trying to make sense of the emotions her closeness had stirred in him. Pride, admiration, and fear swirled together, leaving him unsettled. On the way back, the silence between them spoke louder than any words. They both knew the act was convincing, but they also sensed that something more than their agreement was beginning to unfold. That night, as he stood by his bedroom window,
he admitted to himself that the maid wasn't just a pawn in his game. Somehow, she had become the key that could change everything. The days that followed were marked by a strange tension between them. Their success at the event had strengthened the act, but it had also awakened feelings neither was ready to admit. The millionaire avoided looking directly at her, afraid his eyes would give away too much. She, in turn, kept her composure firm, even though her heart raced at unexpected moments. One morning, he noticed her in the kitchen and saw details he'd never paid attention to before. The grace in her movements, the focus she gave to simple tasks. For the first time, he didn't see her as the maid. He saw her as a woman. The realization made him uncomfortable, and he quickly covered it up with a sarcastic remark. She just raised an eyebrow, answering with sharp wit, completely unshaken. As time passed, small moments began to stand out. An accidental touch, a lingering glance, an unexpected smile. Each gesture fed a quiet feeling growing between them, despite their efforts to ignore it. The line between pretending and reality was blurring. During a family gathering, the maid was asked to sit at the table. The gesture, forced by their act, caused clear discomfort. Hostile questions came quickly, but she answered with confidence, never backing down. Watching her closely, the millionaire felt a surge of pride, something he never expected to feel for someone outside his world.
That evening, as he walked through the garden, he found her alone, gazing up at the stars. The silence between them was broken only by an unexpected confession. "You're stronger than everyone in this house." The words slipped out before he could stop himself. She looked at him, surprised, but only answered with a faint, knowing smile. The compliment didn't erase the fact that the social barrier between them was still very real. They both knew that outside of their charade, they belonged to different worlds. Still, it was impossible to ignore the growing connection pulling them closer. With every day, the line between lies and truth kept blurring. In the quiet of her thoughts, the maid began to feel afraid for herself. Their pact had started as a financial arrangement, but her heart was no longer following the rules. What began as a simple quest for independence had turned into a battle between reason and emotion. It was a risk she'd never planned on taking. The millionaire, on the other hand, was fighting his own pride. Admitting he was falling for someone he'd always looked down on felt unthinkable. And yet, her face stayed with him even when he closed his eyes, like a flame he couldn't put out. In that moment, they both realized the game had changed. What began as a simple act was becoming an invisible thread tying their two opposite worlds together. But the stronger that thread grew, the greater the danger that everything could fall apart. Rumors about the millionaire's supposed relationship had already spread among the elite. His family, uncomfortable with the situation, decided to keep a closer watch on the maid. What used to be dull family gatherings now felt like subtle interrogations. Her every move was analyzed, her every word weighed as if hiding a secret. The millionaire's mother, with a stern expression, invited the young woman to a private conversation. Seated in a grand parlor surrounded by portraits of ancestors, the maid stayed calm through every sharp question. Her mother was looking for cracks in their story, but the young woman's composure surprised her. For the first time, the matriarch couldn't easily dismantle someone. Meanwhile, his father kept pushing his son to reconsider his choices. He talked about business deals, contracts, and alliances that were at stake. The millionaire listened quietly, but inside, his defiance grew. The more they pressured him, the more he realized he didn't want to live as a pawn in someone else's game. His arrangement with the maid, which had started as a simple strategy, now felt like his only shot at freedom. The days grew suffocating.
His family hired people to dig into the young woman's past, searching for anything that could expose her. When she found out, instead of crumbling, she grew even more determined. There was nothing in her past that shamed her. Her life was simple, but it was honest. Amid all the tension, the millionaire began feeling something he'd never felt before: the need to protect someone other than himself. When he heard dismissive comments about her, he stood his ground and defended her in front of others. The gesture surprised everyone, even himself. It was as if he were discovering a side of himself he never knew was there.
The maid, for her part, watched him closely. Every move he made her rethink the image she had of him as just another arrogant boss. Sure, he could be harsh, but there was also a spark of kindness that showed up when she least expected it. That contradiction left her torn between doubt and admiration. The looks they exchanged grew more intense. With every obstacle, their bond grew stronger. They weren't just partners in a lie anymore. They were allies fighting back against a system trying to crush them. Still, the danger was real. If they were exposed, they'd both be ruined. That week, an important business dinner brought together powerful figures. The maid stood by his side, enduring suspicious looks and backhanded compliments. Her composure was flawless, but inside, she felt the weight of keeping up their act under so many watchful eyes. When they got back home, he thanked her, for the first time and sincerely. It was a brief moment, but it meant more than he could say. She smiled softly, aware that the wall between employer and employee was slowly coming down. Their pact was becoming more than just an arrangement. It was as if some greater force was pushing them together, making them face truths they'd rather ignore. Their first kiss happened unexpectedly. During reception, someone made a joke suggesting their relationship was fake. On impulse, the millionaire pulled her close and kissed her right in front of everyone. What was supposed to be part of the act turned into something real, raw and honest in a way neither wanted to admit. The room buzzed with whispers, and his family held back their anger. To everyone else, the kiss proved their relationship was real. But for the two of them, it was a quiet shock. When they pulled apart, the look they shared said more than words ever could. There was no denying the attraction between them anymore. In the days that followed, the air between them felt charged. He tried to act normal, keeping up his arrogant front, but his eyes gave him away every time they met. She, in turn, avoided being alone with him, afraid her feelings would slip out. They'd crossed the line between pretending and reality, and there was no going back. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves alone in the mansion's library. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of rain against the windows. He tried making small talk, but the tension was too strong. "That kiss, it wasn't just part of the plan, was it?" he asked quietly. She looked away, not brave enough to answer. Her heart was beating out of rhythm. She wanted to deny it, but she knew the lie would be too obvious. Finally, she just said, "We can't confuse things." Her voice was steady, but it hid the storm raging inside her. He smiled slightly, as if he'd gotten the answer he expected all along.
Days went by, and stolen moments became inevitable. Every lingering look, every accidental touch only deepened the tension between them. What started as a lie had turned into a minefield of real emotions. One wrong step, and everything could blow up. His family, watching closely, began to notice the shift. What once seemed like a perfect performance was becoming harder to control. The millionaire, who used to act indifferent, was now clearly getting emotionally involved. That only fueled his parents' anger. They saw their carefully laid plans falling apart. No matter how hard she tried to resist, the maid could no longer deny what she felt. Every gesture from him broke down her walls. Every word slipped past her defenses. The fear of losing herself in an impossible love kept growing, but the spark had already been lit. As for the millionaire, he was fighting a battle within himself. Pride and desire clashed, clouding his judgment. For the first time in his life, he didn't know how to handle his own feelings. In that moment, they both understood. The lie had grown bigger than their agreement. What started as pretend was no longer an act. It was the beginning of a truth that could change everything. Rumors about their relationship had spread, and the elite, curious and often cruel, wouldn't miss a chance to test how real this union was. At an upscale dinner, rivals set a trap to expose the maid. Tricky questions came her way, paired with thinly veiled smirks. Every word felt like a setup, and the tension kept rising. A socialite known for her sharp tongue asked intimate details about their relationship, hoping to catch her off guard. The maid took a deep breath and answered naturally, as if each memory were real. The room fell silent, impressed by her confidence. Still, the looks of disdain remained. They were waiting for any slip-up. Later that evening, a crueler trap was set. An old flame of the millionaire approached, taunting the maid with sly remarks. Poisonous words were thrown her way, and humiliation seemed inevitable. But instead of backing down, she held her head high and responded with quiet strength, showing a dignity that left even the harshest critics speechless. Watching from nearby, the millionaire felt his blood boil. For the first time, he couldn't stay silent. He stepped forward and, in front of everyone, defended her fiercely. He made it clear no one had the right to disrespect her. His strong reaction surprised everyone. They were used to his cold, detached demeanor. The night ended with suspicious looks and even more whispers. Far from being exposed, their act seemed stronger than ever. But deep down, they both knew that every public appearance raised the stakes. The risk of being discovered grew right along with the bond forming between them. Back at the mansion, the air was thick with unspoken tension. Still angry, he confessed he couldn't stand to see anyone treat her that way. She was moved and thanked him, but reminded him it was all part of their act. Still, they both knew the truth had already begun to show in every word, every gesture between them.
Alone in her room, the maid replayed the evening in her mind. The strength she'd shown wasn't just for keeping up the act. It came from a feeling slowly taking root in her heart. For the first time, she felt she wasn't just fighting for money, but for something she didn't dare name. In his own room, he stood facing the mirror. The arrogance that had always defined him seemed to crumble. Pride still fought back, but the image of her holding her ground in front of a hostile crowd stayed with him. He felt something he couldn't control, something that scared him and drew him in at the same time. That night, they both realized the elite could try to expose them all they wanted, but the real danger came from within, from the truth growing silently in their own hearts. His family, suspicious of how convincingly the act was holding up, decided to take action. Private investigators were hired to dig into every detail of the maid's life. It didn't take long for documents, witness statements, and records to pile up, forming a dossier meant to end their charade once and for all. One quiet afternoon, the millionaire was called into his father's study. A thick folder lay on the desk waiting to be opened. As he flipped through it, he found proof that their relationship was an elaborate lie. Photos, reports, even statements from people who'd known her in the past. It was the perfect trap. His heart raced not just from the risk of exposure, but from fear of what it would mean for her. His father's voice was stern as he demanded an immediate end to the farce and the announcement of the arranged engagement. Anger surged through the young man, but inside, a bigger battle raged. Protect the woman he was beginning to love, or give in to his family's expectations. The silence that followed was louder than any words could. The maid, meanwhile, could feel the atmosphere shifting in the mansion. Suspicious looks grew more intense, whispers more frequent. She sensed something had been uncovered, she just didn't know how serious it was. Still, she held her head high, determined not to show weakness. That night, he asked to speak with her privately.
His tone was tense, filled with uncertainty. He hesitated between telling her the truth or shielding her from the blow. When he finally revealed that their secret had been discovered, fear flashed in her eyes, but so did courage. "So this is where it ends?" she asked, her voice steady. He didn't answer right away. His silence said more than words could. Pride still held him back, but his heart pleaded for a different choice. The weight of the decision felt crushing. For the first time, he stood at a crossroads that would define not only his future, but hers as well. While the mansion slept, he stayed awake thinking through every step that had led them here. The lie had spiraled beyond his control, turning into something bigger than he ever imagined. Now he had to decide whether he had the courage to stand up to his family and the world, or let love die in silence.
Back in her room, the maid cried quietly. Not because she was afraid of losing the money she'd been promised, but because she knew she'd already lost something far more valuable. Her heart no longer belonged to her alone. Fate, relentless as ever, was putting them through their biggest test yet. Their act was about to be exposed, and with it, perhaps, would come a truth neither of them dared to speak aloud. The next morning brought an almost unbearable weight. The millionaire woke with the decision pounding in his mind: give in to his father or fight back against everything. During breakfast, the cold stares from his family felt like invisible chains tightening around him. Every word spoken sounded like an order, and his silence only made the pressure worse. The maid, quietly serving, could feel the tension in the air like a sentence already passed. After breakfast, his father called him back into the study. This time, there was no room for negotiation. In a hard voice, he demanded that his son announce the official engagement that very week. The millionaire tried to argue, but he was cut off with clear threats, losing his inheritance, his position in the business. With every word from his father, his pride crumbled a little more, and the feeling of powerlessness grew. When he stepped out of the study, he found the maid in the hallway. Her gaze, steady and silent, seemed to see right through him. He wanted to say something, anything to comfort her, but he just looked away. His pride wouldn't let him confess his weakness or admit how much he'd come to depend on her. That silence hurt her more than any words could have. That night, he locked himself in his room and drank more than he should have. The face in the mirror looked different, not like the arrogant heir anymore, but like someone lost, without the strength to fight back. For the first time, he felt he could lose everything, not just his fortune, but the one person who had started to give his life meaning. Alone in her room, the maid thought over the last few days. Their pact, which had started as a game, didn't even matter anymore. The money felt small compared to the pain of realizing she might never be more than a disposable piece in someone else's plan. She cried quietly, but at the same time, she made a promise to herself. She wouldn't let this break her. Her dignity was her greatest treasure. The next day, the mood in the mansion was even heavier. News that the official engagement would soon be announced spread among the staff. The maid tried to avoid crossing paths with him, but when they finally did, the silence between them was brutal. Neither said what they truly felt, and the emptiness of that distance hurt more than any argument. His family, satisfied, believed they had won, but inside, the millionaire's anger only grew. His pride still kept him from admitting how he felt, but his heart was screaming for a different choice. He was standing at the edge. He would lose everything if he didn't act, including the woman he'd already secretly fallen for. That night, lying awake, he remembered her strength in front of the elite, her quiet smile in the garden, the kiss that had set his soul on fire. Those memories tormented him, making him question whether he had the courage to break the chains that bound him.
The silence between them had become unbearable. Their pact was hanging by a thread, and with it, everything they had built. It seemed like everything was about to fall apart, unless the millionaire found the courage to choose his heart over his pride. News of the arranged engagement spread quickly among the elite. Invitations were being prepared, and his name appeared in the papers as a symbol of a powerful alliance. But to him, the glory splashed across the headlines felt like an unbearable weight. Emptiness spread through his chest like a shadow he could no longer ignore. Back at the mansion, the maid went about her duties with her usual discipline, but the light in her eyes was gone. Every time she passed him, her heart ached. The distance between them, now widened by the engagement announcement, felt impossible to cross. Still, in silence, she held on to the memory of moments that could never be erased. He, in turn, avoided her, unable to face the pain in her eyes. Walking through the halls, he remembered every moment they'd shared, the rehearsals, the glances, the kiss. It all felt like a distant dream now, crushed by the harsh reality his father had forced him on. Pride kept him trapped, but the emptiness ate away at him more each day. One lonely night, he walked through the garden where he'd so often found her. The cold wind carried memories of her laughter, her courage, her quiet dignity. Surrounded by silence, tears finally escaped his eyes. The arrogant air was gone, replaced by a man learning the cost of denying his own heart. Meanwhile, the maid cried in her room, not for the money she'd never receive, but from the feeling of an irreplaceable loss. Against all logic, she'd fallen for a man who could never truly be hers. The pain was so real it felt suffocating, yet she refused to break. She wouldn't let them humiliate her. In the days that followed, he withdrew even from his family. He sat through meetings in silence, without enthusiasm. Talk of business and alliances felt hollow. The more people spoke of power, the heavier his loneliness grew. He was surrounded by everything he'd ever wanted, yet empty of everything that truly mattered. During one of these meetings, someone made a comment about the maid, suggesting she'd just been a distraction. The remark, said with a mocking tone, ignited something in the millionaire's heart. For the first time, he felt ashamed, not of her, but of himself for letting things come to this. His pride was no longer enough to justify his cowardice. That night, he faced himself in the mirror again. The man looking back wasn't the arrogant heir anymore, but someone lost, trapped by choices that were pulling him further from the only real thing he'd ever known. His loneliness showed him that no inheritance was worth losing the woman he loved. The emptiness became too painful to bear. The millionaire knew he had to act or spend the rest of his life imprisoned by a lie. For the first time, he felt ready to risk it all: his fortune, his status, even his family's approval, for something truer.
In the quiet of that night, a decision began to take shape in his heart. He still didn't have the courage to say it out loud, but he knew he couldn't stay silent any longer. The emptiness he felt was the cruelest proof that living without her wouldn't be living at all. The family pressure reached its peak. The day of the official engagement announcement had arrived, and the ballroom was filled with guests, journalists, and political allies. Everything was set for the millionaire to confirm his commitment. His father stood firmly by his side, certain nothing could go wrong. But inside the young man's heart, a storm was brewing. As he listened to the formal speeches, his mind drifted to memories of the maid. Every gesture, every smile, every word from her echoed louder than talk of alliances and fortunes. He felt suffocated, as if every second spent there was a death sentence. The pride that had kept him quiet was crumbling under the need to act. The maid, watching from a distance, tried to stay strong. She was there only as staff, but every glance toward the stage felt like a stab to her heart. Silently, her heart begged him to choose love over power, even though her mind told her there was no chance. For her, this felt like the end of their act and the end of what could never truly be. At the decisive moment, when his father announced the engagement and waited for his son's confirmation, the entire room held its breath. But the millionaire surprised everyone. He stood up and in a firm voice declared he would not accept the marriage. The silence that followed was crushing, broken only by shocked whispers and stunned stares. He took a deep breath and continued. He said he wasn't a bargaining chip and wouldn't sacrifice his life for a business arrangement. Then, in front of everyone, he revealed he'd made his choice. He wouldn't marry the woman his family had chosen. He would follow his heart instead. He didn't say the maid's name, but everyone knew exactly who he meant. The reaction was instant. His father exploded in anger, accusing him of destroying years of planning. His mother stood speechless, watching in disbelief. The guests whispered, some outraged, others fascinated by his boldness. But the millionaire didn't back down. For the first time, he spoke as the author of his own destiny. After his declaration, he stepped off the stage and walked straight to the maid. Her eyes were wide with shock, fear, and emotion. In front of everyone, he took her hand, a simple gesture, but a powerful one. The room erupted in murmurs, but in that moment, for the two of them, the rest of the world faded away. She tried to pull back, whispering that this would ruin him, but he held her hand firmly and said, "I can't live without the truth, and the truth is you." Those words spoken in the middle of the chaos marked a final break from his past. The choice was made. He had defied his family, the elite, and his own pride. Now all that was left was to face the consequences.
The millionaire's decision hit society like a bomb. The next day, newspapers ran headlines about the scandal. The heir who defied his family and turned down a multi-million-dollar alliance for love of a maid. Her name, once invisible, was now on everyone's lips, followed by criticism, insults, and cruel speculation. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was unbearable. His father, furious, cut him off from the family business and declared he would no longer support him financially. The heir went from being the prince of the elite to a man completely on his own, no inheritance, no status. His mother, though silent, didn't lift a finger to defend him. The break was final. The maid, for her part, felt the weight of his decision on her shoulders. She knew she'd become a target for hate and scorn, accused of being opportunistic. Still, she also saw it as the price of something real. Even so, fear of the future haunted her. She was willing to walk away if it meant he wouldn't lose everything because of her. Now, stripped of the luxury he'd always known, the millionaire was facing life raw and unfiltered. With every loss, though, he felt freer. He was no longer a pawn in his family's game. He was a man who owned his choices. The sacrifice was painful, but for the first time, he felt truly alive. Between them, their relationship grew even stronger. In moments of loneliness, they found strength in each other. She supported him, reminding him that his courage was worth more than any fortune. He, in turn, was learning the value of dignity and real love, things money could never buy. But the sacrifices didn't stop there. Friends from the elite kept their distance, contracts were canceled, and doors that were once open now closed firmly. The world that had once welcomed him easily had become a minefield. Still, the millionaire didn't care. Every obstacle reminded him he'd chosen truth. The maid still wrestled with guilt,
Some nights she told herself she should leave, free him from the weight of her presence. But every time he looked her in the eyes and said he had no regrets, her own resolve grew stronger. Society was divided. Some condemned him, others admired his boldness. Their story was no longer just a secret, it had become an example of courage and sacrifice. The love that began as a lie had turned into a symbol of resistance against social conventions. Despite everything, they knew harder trials lay ahead. But lying side by side, they understood that even facing the toughest consequences, they'd already won the greatest victory of all, the freedom to love without pretending. The days that followed were about rebuilding. Far from the mansion and the privileges he'd known since birth, the millionaire began living a simple life. At first, the adjustment was hard. Tasks he'd never done, bills to pay, doors closing at the mention of his name. But with the maid by his side, every challenge felt easier to face. For the first time, he was experiencing the genuine freedom of choosing his own path.
The maid, in turn, watched his transformation with admiration. The arrogant, spoiled man she once knew was becoming someone who could laugh at himself, apologize, and even accept help. Day by day, she was falling in love, not with the heir to a fortune, but with the man rising from the ashes of his own pride. Still, the ghosts of the past didn't disappear. Society kept talking, pointing at them as a living scandal. Some people tried to humiliate her in public, but the millionaire was always by her side, no longer as her boss, but as her partner. That loyalty, earned through sacrifice, was the clearest proof that their love had outgrown the lie it started from. One sunny afternoon, they walked together through the city park. Looking around, he remarked how everything felt new. He'd never noticed children laughing, the scent of flowers, or the simplicity of a wooden bench before. She smiled, holding his hand, and said, "That's what it means to be truly alive." The turning point came when he looked into her eyes and said, "I lost my fortune, I lost my status, but I gained you, and that's worth more than anything." The sincerity in his voice brought tears to her eyes. For the first time, there were no masks, no act, no pact, just love. That night, in their small apartment, they celebrated the quiet victory they'd won. There were no crowds, no applause, just the certainty that they had overcome their greatest enemy, fear. The love that began with a lie had become the most powerful truth in their lives. The maid, now free from the role that once confined her, realized her dignity had never been a burden. It was her greatest strength. And the millionaire, freed from his gilded cage, learned that real power isn't measured in wealth, but in the courage to love. Over time, new doors opened, not because he was an heir, but because together they had learned to face the world with their heads held high. The respect they earned not from his last name, but from the strength they found in each other. Ahead of them, challenges remained, but so did hope. Their love, born from a lie, had become their liberation. It was an imperfect love, marked with scars, but that's exactly what made it real. And so, walking side by side, they understood the most important lesson of all. Freedom isn't found in riches, it's found in the courage to follow your heart. In the end, love had set them free. They proved that when you have the courage to face the world, even a lie can reveal the truest kind of love. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, subscribe now and join our community. Here, every new video brings emotions you won't forget.